Good evening. My name is Rob Trewartha, and I'm delighted to be your host for tonight's City of Mississauga 2023 Citywide Budget Engagement Session. The city is inviting residents to participate in the budgeting discussion by phone or through an audio live stream on the city's website at mississauga.ca/budget. Joining me this evening is Mayor Bonnie Crombie, members of council, and senior city staff. Before we hear from our speakers, let me start by explaining how this session works. Right now, residents from all over Mississauga are answering their phones and connecting to the discussion. We will hear from Mayor Crombie shortly. After this, it will be your turn. You will have the chance to ask your questions of the mayor, councillors, and staff, and to raise issues that you think are critical to Mississauga's 2023 budget. You can get in line to ask a question at any time by pressing *3 on your phone keypad. You'll then be put through to an operator who will take down your question and put you in line. For those of you joining us online or on the audio stream, please type your question into the question field provided. If you have a question about the 2023 budget, but don't get a chance to ask it during our session tonight, you can send it to the following email address: budget@mississauga.ca. That's budget@mississauga.ca. We will provide you with a response shortly. If you would like to review the proposed 2023 budget, you can do so at mississauga.ca/budget. Throughout this session, we will also be asking you questions in the form of quick polls. From time to time over the next hour and a half, I will read out a question and some multiple choice responses, and you will be able to use your keypad to respond. Here are a few things to keep in mind when you ask a question tonight. When using your phone to ask a question, press *3 on your keypad, and you'll be routed to an operator who will ask you to provide your name and the nature of your question. Please try to keep your question as brief as possible. There are a lot of people on the line, and we want to get to as many of your questions as we can. Remember to make sure your question is about the 2023 budget and priorities for the year ahead. If you are joining us online or on the audio live stream, please type your question into the question field, and we'll put your question into the queue. Again, my name is Rob Trewartha, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this budget engagement session with Mayor Crombie, members of council, and senior staff from the City of Mississauga. It's my job to keep this conversation moving smoothly and to make sure we get to hear your opinions, as well as have as much discussion as possible. Before we get to your questions, I would like to invite Mayor Crombie to say a few words. Mayor Crombie, what would you like Mississauga residents to know about the 2023 city budget?
And welcome and thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening. First, I want to thank my colleagues who have joined us this evening from council, and some of them are here live in the room with us and others are virtual. Please give a wave to Councillor Stephen Dasco from Ward 1. Stephen, would you like to say a quick hello?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much for joining us this evening for our budget call.
Perfect, thank you. And our new Ward 2 Councillor, Alvin Tedjo. Alvin. Let's say a quick hello.
For our first budget session here of the year. Thank you.
Perfect. From Ward 4, Councillor John Kovac. John.
Madam Mayor, thank you and welcome to everyone. I hope you enjoy this evening's discussion. I hope you'll find it fruitful. Thank you.
Ward 6 Councillor, our new Councillor from Ward 6, Joe Hornick.
Here.
From Ward 8, Matt Mahoney. Oh, I think Matt is joining us. He's just logging on again. He was having some video issues, but I know he'll be joining us from Ward 8. From Ward 9, our new Councillor, Martin Reed.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight.
And our new Councillor from Ward 11, Brad Butt. Brad?
Mayor, good evening to everyone, and we're looking forward to hearing from you all.
Thank you, Councillors. Also from our leadership team at the City of Mississauga, they're here to answer your questions. Please give a wave. Paul Mitchum, our City Manager and Chief Administrative Officer. You'll be hearing from all of them later. Sherry Lichterman, who is our Commissioner of Corporate Services and our Chief Financial Officer. Sherry, there she is. Andrew Whittemore, our Commissioner of Planning and Building. Andrew, that fancy painting behind you. Jody Robelos, our Commissioner of Community Services. Jody, there we go. And Jeff Wright, who is our Commissioner of Transportation and Works. Jeff, I'm sure there'll be quite a few questions for you. I want to start by acknowledging the tremendous progress that we've made over the past year as we recover from the pandemic. We've seen our businesses and our community open up, grow, and thrive once again. People are back at work. Festivals are alive on Celebration Square. Transit ridership is increasing, and our recreation centers are bustling with activity. But the reality is the pandemic's impacts are still rippling through our city. Our small businesses continue to struggle financially after 2 difficult years, along with ongoing delays in the global supply chain. As a city, we are grappling with a $52 million deficit, despite support from both the province and the federal governments throughout the course of the pandemic. And we're all feeling the pinch of high levels of inflation not seen for decades, which is contributing to the rising cost of living and doing business while also increasing an uncertain economic future. While this past year has had its share of challenges, it's also provided us with an opportunity to come together as a community in many ways. And I remain confident that Mississauga and its residents will be able to continue to tackle the challenges we face head on and emerge stronger. We have a business plan and budget that will allow us to respond to current and future challenges, which is, of course, why we're here tonight. Because our current environment is very much a no-frills budget. As a city, we're facing many of the same pressures as others are, but I want you to know that we're committed to tightening our belts with a focus on maintaining service levels and planning for our future growth. These pressures have been further compounded by the fact that Mississauga and all cities across the province are facing as they deliberate their budgets as a result of the new provincial legislation. Many will have seen in the news that the province has recently passed the More Homes Built Faster Act, also known as Bill 23, which will drastically reduce our capital reserves due to changes in how we collect development charges on new builds. I want to be clear that Mississauga shares the same goal as the province to build more housing that is affordable and within reach, but we need to work together to achieve it. And that can't be done on the backs of taxpayers, because these benefits are helping developers and will cost the city over $85 million each year in lost revenue. We're trying to build a great city and to accommodate growth, but as it stands, the city will be forced to either put the brakes on our plans or plan on significant tax increases from 5 to 10% for the next decade, making it impossible to complete repairs or work done to support our infrastructure plans like our roads, our bridges, our sewers, our community centers, arenas, libraries, etc., and other critical pieces of infrastructure that we rely on and you rely on each and every single day, let alone plan for the construction of new infrastructure to meet the needs of a rapidly growing population. I have made Council's concerns with Bill 23 known to the provincial government, and also that it's not too late to fix this legislation to eliminate any future impacts on taxpayers. Mississauga and all cities need to be compensated for any and all losses as a result of this new legislation. I want to be very clear that we're doing everything in our power to draft a budget that is balanced, keeping taxes competitive, maintaining our city services, and minimizing impacts to taxpayers. Tonight, you're going to learn about Mississauga's 2023 budget priorities and how we will continue to deliver for our residents who have entrusted us to be prudent fiscal managers with their tax dollars. And our priorities for our residents remain the same: delivering the right services, demonstrating value for tax dollars, maintaining our infrastructure in a good state of repair, and maintaining current service levels. It's also important to look ahead and invest in the future to ensure Mississauga continues to be a great city with a high quality of life that residents enjoy today. Investments in our city's future are important to maintain the high quality of life that our residents have come to enjoy and come to expect. Our budget process is transparent and it's democratic. As residents, you have a say in how we develop it, either through your elected representatives or by getting directly involved in the process. That's why we encourage you to stay connected and engaged in the process, and why I'm so happy to see so many of you here online with us tonight. And now I'm going to hand things back to our moderator, Rob, to begin the session. Rob, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Crombie. For those of you just joining us, my name is Rob Trewartha, and I'm your moderator for this evening's budget engagement session with Mayor Crombie, members of council, and senior staff from the City of Mississauga to talk about the 2023 budget. Just a reminder, you can press *3 on your phone at any time to get in line to ask a question. You can also participate in this discussion online by visiting the city's website at www.mississauga.ca/budget. There, you can listen to the discussion live and can also ask questions by typing them into the question field. In addition to hearing questions directly from you, we have the ability to do quick polls. So let's do one now. I'm going to ask a question and then read out a few possible answers. You choose the one that best reflects your opinion by pressing the number on your phone keypad that corresponds with your answers. For those online, just select the option on the screen that best reflects your opinion. Please listen to all of the answers before making your selection. Here's our first question. Of the following, which city service is most important to you and your family? If it's libraries, press 1. For transit, press 2. Roads, cycle paths, and infrastructure, press 3. Recreation programs, press 4. And for parks and forestry, press 5. Again, that question is, of the following, which city service is most important to you and your family? Libraries, press 1. Transit, press 2. Roads, cycle paths, and infrastructure, press 3. Recreation programs, press 4. And parks, green spaces, and trails, press 5. We'll have another poll question for you later, so look for that coming up. Now, let's get to our first question of the night. Our first question comes online from Baljit. Baljit asks, why are my property taxes increasing in 2023? Mayor Crombie?
Thank you, and let me please also acknowledge Councillor Matt Mahoney that has joined us. Matt, give a quick hello before I get started.
And welcome to everybody. Certainly looking forward to this budget session and discussion. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So the question is, why are property taxes increasing? And I think the easiest answer is there's a continuing lag effect from COVID, but also inflation. The city faces the same inflationary pressures as each and every one of our residents do. And this is even before the impact the city will face as a result of Bill 23, which I think we will see more acutely next year. So the city is dealing with high inflation, much the way our residents are, like the rest of the world is. And this impacts the city as much as it impacts our residents and our businesses. But we're doing everything we can to minimize the impact of inflation on you because you're our taxpayers. The cost of diesel, utilities, and other materials and supplies have increased dramatically. If the city doesn't fund the increased and unavoidable costs, transit services would need to be reduced and fire response times would be increased. Construction costs are also substantially increased despite measures that have been put in place to mitigate the impacts of inflation. And as a result, the same tax dollars are now funding fewer road repavings, fewer buildings being built and renovated. The city, like all municipalities in Ontario, are not permitted to run a deficit. So funding shortfalls can only be addressed in one of two ways, and that's either through higher taxes or reduced programs and services, neither of which we want to impose on our taxpayers. I think I'll also pass this question on to our city manager, Paul Mitchum, and he can respond as well. Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Crombie. As you have stated, the 2023 budget is largely driven by inflation. Inflation, as we all know now, is running somewhere in the 6.7 to 7% range per annum. And the team has worked hard over the past several months to mitigate the impact of inflation through continuous improvement and cost reduction. So for 2023, we have submitted $3.5 million in cost reduction, adding to a total of $74 million submitted in cost reduction, since 2009. Secondly, in terms of developing the budget, we have mandated virtually no new tax-funded staff. I say virtually because there's some very, very small amount in parks management. The result being overall between cost reduction, our mandate on staffing, and our collective efforts, we've been able to reduce the impact on the operating side to 4.2%, well below the rate of inflation. But inflation, too, has really hurt us on the capital side. And so we've asked in this budget to increase our transfer to capital for infrastructure from 2% to 3%. The inflation, in fact, on capital project works is running probably significantly in excess of the 7%. So when all is said and done, our tax rate moving forward will be competitive with others within the Greater Toronto Area. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to our moderator.
Thank you, Paul. Let's get right into another question. Our next question comes from Mila, and she asks online, what is the city doing to make housing more affordable for residents? Mayor Crombie?
Thank you. I'd like to kick this off and then pass it over to our Commissioner of Housing and Building as well. Let me say that we are in a building phase here in Mississauga. A decade ago, we were only building 2,000 units a year, but last year in 2021, we approved over 5,000 units, and in 2022, over 6,000. But most importantly, Mississauga was the first and maybe the only city that had a strategy called Making Room for Middle-Class Housing and for the middle class. And we have 4 goals and 40 actions that aim to provide housing that's affordable for everyone. Almost 90% of the strategy's actions are completed, ongoing, or underway, and some of the highlights include securing affordable units in new developments. So every time a new development is built, there will be a percentage set aside that will be affordable. Amending the zoning bylaw to make it easier to build secondary units such as basement apartments. Adopting a bylaw to protect rental units from demolition or conversion. So we want to protect the purpose-built rentals that are in place now. Establishing an affordable housing reserve fund to support future projects. We've amended the zoning bylaw to reduce the parking requirement for all housing. And we're approving a development charge relief grant program for affordable rental housing. And we've amended fees and charges bylaw for not-for-profit housing providers so that they would be subject to lower fees or no fees. Andrew, why don't you speak a little more about the plans we have to make our housing more affordable for all our residents? Andrew, over to you.
Madam Mayor, you did a very great job overviewing the various initiatives Council has put into place. I would say that one of the biggest things that Council is doing is planning for the future. And this Council has approved a plan that would support upwards of 150,000 new units in Mississauga over the next 30 years. But ultimately, as you say, what the city is really responsible for is creating a framework where the development community can actually deliver the housing. The city does not deliver the housing. So a lot of what our effort has been is to streamline our processes and to improve our policies so that the development of the units, the affordable units, can occur more readily. Obviously, one of the big other components to all of this is the advocacy to both the federal and provincial levels of government. They play a very important role in the delivery of affordable housing, and that's something that this council has championed from the get-go. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to turn it back to the moderator. So when you complete the answer to the question, just turn it back to Rob so we can move on to the next questions. Rob, over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and Andrew. If you're just joining us, my name is Rob Treworth and I'm your moderator this evening. I'm joined tonight by Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie, members of council and senior leadership staff from the City of Mississauga to talk about the 2023 budget. Remember, those joining us by phone can press *3 at any time on your keypad to let us know you would like to ask a question. For those of you online, please type your question into the question field. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in the first poll. The first poll question was, which city service is most important to you and your family? 2% answered libraries, 13% answered transit, 56% answered roads, cycle paths, and infrastructure, 11% recreation programs, and 18% parks and forestry. Let's do another poll question, shall we? Our second poll question is, how would you prefer the city fund its services? If you think the city should increase service levels and increase taxes above the rate of inflation, press 1. If you think the city should maintain service levels and increase taxes at around the rate of inflation, press 2. If you think the city should decrease service levels and reduce taxes, press 3. The question again is, how would you prefer the city fund its services? If you think the city should increase service levels and increase taxes above the rate of inflation, press 1. Maintain service levels and increase taxes at around the level of inflation, press 2, or decrease service levels and reduce taxes, press 3. Thank you all for your feedback. So let's get to another question. Our next question comes to us online from Salma. Salma asks, what are some of the challenges the city is facing for 2023? Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Selma, for the question. With limited revenue tools available to us, and with such high inflation, the city is facing more significant challenges than we have really experienced in many decades, Selma. The 2023 budget incorporates significant increases to funds spent on our utilities and fuel to allow us to maintain our current service levels. Construction prices have also increased well beyond the inflation rate, which either requires increased funding to maintain our infrastructure or deferred work to later years. So projects can't be completed this year, we defer them out to other years. And new initiatives have to be kept to a minimum, Selma. But I think I'll also ask our CFO, Sherry Lichterman, who is also our Commissioner of Corporate Services, to address this issue because it's of financial nature. Sherry, over to you.
Thanks, Mayor Crombie. I think I would just add to your point. You mentioned earlier Bill 23 from the province, and so we'll be monitoring that closely, obviously, as we head into 2023. Right now, it could have a significant impact on us financially, and we are looking to the province to follow through on their commitment to work with municipalities to reimburse cities for the impacts that we're going to see. So that will be a big challenge for us, and certainly we're hoping to work closely with the province on that. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Sherry. We'll go to our next question, which comes online from Alice. Alice asks, what percentage of the city's budget is spent on parks and forestry? Over to you, Madam Mayor.
Well, that's a great question. In fact, I was just looking it up. To put it in perspective, our largest service category is transit, which is about 35% of our budget. So parks and forestry, on the capital side, it's almost 15%. which is $71 million. And on the operating side, it represents 6% of our budget, which is $39 million. And that, of course, includes not only parks, recreation, but the money we're setting aside for sustainability and the environment, to green our environment here in Mississauga as well. So for more information, I think I'll pass it on to our Commissioner of Community Services, Jody Robolos. Jody, over to you.
Appreciate the question. Really, I mean, the Parks, Forestry, and Environment Division is a large division, and you can see that by the percentage of tax dollars that are being spent. But, you know, we have also got some significant feedback from residents, especially during the pandemic, about our parks and green spaces as well. So, you know, all of the upgrade of the infrastructure that you see, both from a capital replacement perspective, but also new parks that are included in that as well. So happy for the resident, if there's any further questions, happy to contact them and dive in a little bit deeper if they would like to. So thank you, and pass that back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Jody. If you're just joining us, my name is Rob Trewartha, and I'm your moderator this evening. I am joined tonight by Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie, members of council, and senior leadership staff from the City of Mississauga talking about the 2023 budget. For those of you who are joining us by phone, you can press *3 on your keypad at any time to let us know you would like to ask a question. For those of you online, please type your question into the question field. Well, let's go to another question. This question comes online from John. John asks, will the city's stormwater charge go up every year? Madam Mayor?
Well, that's a great question, John. Thank you for that. And you know that we're one of the first major cities to implement the stormwater charge, and we only collect what we need each and every year. But the stormwater rate does increase, and it's determined on an annual basis through the fees and charges bylaw, which is of course subject to a council approval. And this year's stormwater rate continues to increase with this principle. And what I will tell you is it does address our stormwater capital needs, the maintenance of our underground infrastructure, operations needs, things like protecting us from environmental impact and changes. It builds our stormwater ponds and helps address erosion, etc. So I think what I'll do is I'll have our Commissioner of Transportation and Works, Jeff Wright, or maybe our Commissioner of Corporate Services, Sherry Lichterman, also address the question for you. So Jeff, do you want to take a first go at it, please?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and great summary of the question. And so our stormwater network has an overall asset value of $5.2 billion. So we need to create a fund, which we've established through the stormwater charge, to ultimately have money in place to repair and replace that asset, like the stormwater pipes that are underground. So think of it like the roof on your house. You need to put money aside for when you need to replace that roof, just as we're putting money aside to replace the underground stormwater pipes that are in the ground today. So the stormwater charge does fund both the operations of our stormwater program in terms of the operating, the maintenance, the creek erosion projects, but then it funds our capital projects of building new stormwater management ponds, but also provides value for asset management replacement. When we introduced the stormwater charge in 2016, the rate that we introduced it at was set with a plan to increase that every year to get to a sustainable level. So right now we're not at that sustainable level, so we are taking tactful increases on an annual basis. And as the mayor mentioned, the rate that was just approved for April 30th, 2023 is $116.80 per billing unit. And that breaks down, most houses in Mississauga are in that one billing unit category. So that would be roughly the annual charge. I would invite you to go to the Mississauga Stormwater page where you can get a sense of where that money is going in more detail, but also do a calculation on your property for the stormwater charge. So I trust that answers the question, and I'll turn it back to you, Rob, as the moderator.
Thank you very much, Jeff. We'll go to our next question online. It comes from Mary. Mary asks, did I miss the percentage that our property taxes are going up? Toronto is reporting a 5.5% increase next year. What is Mississauga's increase? Madam Mayor?
Well, thank you for the question. In fact, that's a discussion that will begin on Monday morning as we enter into our budget deliberations. As you know, in Toronto, they will be entering their budget discussions, and their proposed tax increase is 5.5%, plus an additional levy to address infrastructure, housing, and transportation at 1.5%. So that's a total increase to the residents of Toronto of 7%. In Mississauga, the city is looking at a 3% increase, but the region of Peel is also looking at an increase of approximately 3.1%. So we could see upwards of 6.1% to the taxpayer in Mississauga if what is being recommended and proposed is approved by our councils. But you can bet that we'll be sharpening our pencils to see where we can make some changes. I don't know if Sherry wants to make any additional comments about the tax increases. So these are budget increases that are being proposed, but these have not yet been passed. Thank you for the question. Sherry Lichterman, who is our Commissioner of Corporate Services, will address it as well.
Mayor Crombie, I think you covered it. I covered it for the most part, but yes, I do want to emphasize that this is the proposed budget, and we have the next couple of weeks of meetings with the Budget Committee that will of course review it and finalize those charges. So back over to Rob.
Well, Rob, before you come in, it just occurred to me that, as many of you know, that we have been advocating as a council that Mississauga leave Peel region, and we could see substantial tax savings should we do so, in the order of over $1 billion in the next decade. So that would be substantial. Also, we're very concerned about the impact of Bill 23, which is the bill I mentioned earlier in my introduction, that could have a significant impact on our tax base as well, from 5 to 10% increase, in addition to the 6% I had mentioned. So these are some changes that we need to have a careful, watchful eye on what the province will do, and we need to continue to advocate for full compensation of any lost revenue from the impact of Bill 23. So please, if you're speaking to your member of provincial parliament, please advocate for compensation for any lost revenue to all our municipalities. And then again, as you know, that having that mexit plan, Mississauga leaving Peel region could see in the long term, very significant savings for us as well. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Remember, for those joining us by phone, you can press *3 on your keypad at any time to let us know you'd like to ask a question. And for those of you who are online, please type your question into the question field, and we will work to get it answered as soon as possible. Next, we're going to go online to Miroslav. Miroslav asks, how is the city managing the deficit from the pandemic? Madam Mayor? Madam Mayor? Miroslav has asked, how is the city managing the deficit from the pandemic?
Thank you, Miroslav, and dziękuję bardzo that you're with us tonight. How are we managing the deficit? Well, we are very strong fiscal managers in Mississauga, and we are watching every penny because it's your money, and we recognize that. But as we continue to recover from the impact of COVID-19, we're facing operating budget deficits in the order of over $50 million. Well into 2023, and this deficit is primarily driven by reduced revenues from our 3 revenue streams, including our payment in lieu of taxes from the Greater Toronto Airport Authority. Of course, we receive funding from every person traveling at the airport, and of course, with COVID, we know that no one was traveling. There were lockdowns, and we went from 50 million people a year to 50,000 a day to 5,000. So significant difference. Reduced income from our transit fares, because as you know, we are operating free transit during COVID, and ridership is still not back up to 100%. So there is not full cost recovery yet. And then of course, we had losses from our recreation revenues were lost because our community centers were closed, as were our pools and arenas. So combined, these losses were $52.5 million at the end of 2022. I don't know if Sherry, you would like to elaborate a little on the impact that COVID had on us managing our deficits. Of course, I know that we did everything we could, implement a hiring freeze, where were many cost mitigating measures. that we could, anything we could implement, we did. We had to cut some servicing, not only in our recreation centers, but to our transit as well. Sherry, why don't you elaborate a little further?
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Yes, we did take a number of measures, as you mentioned, to stem the losses from COVID. And I do also want to recognize that we were able to receive funding from the province, Safe Restart funding, that will offset about 36 million of that $52 million deficit. And we're going to have to dip into our reserves to cover the rest, but we are thankful for that funding. And we are also thankful that as we head into 2023, we've seen transit bounce back close to its pre-COVID levels. Recreation is back as well. And so in 2023, the main impact we'll be seeing left over from COVID is that payment in lieu of taxes from the Toronto airport left over from 2 years ago. And so we continue to recover, and we're using a combination of that provincial funding and our reserves to bounce back. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Our next question comes live from Cheryl. Cheryl has a question about the Downtown Entertainment District. Cheryl, please feel free to ask your question.
Yes, hi, my name is Cheryl Yakus. I'm a resident of Mississauga. The reason I'm calling, I'd like to see some money, taxpayers' money, go into the entertainment district in Mississauga, not necessarily in the central part, perhaps using some properties that are no longer valid in the northern part of Mississauga. What I was thinking, what I'm asking is, if you're in your early 20s, 19, even up to your 60s, if you want to go to dance or you want to have access to different entertainment, you have to go to Toronto, or you have to go out of city to Kitchener, or you have to go to other cities besides Mississauga. Mississauga has wonderful restaurants, and we have a variety, a huge amount of restaurants. We have some local bars, but we don't have anywhere where it can be combined into one unit. There's no longer roller skating for youth. There's no longer great entertainment. I mean, wow, it's wonderful to go to work, to come home, to watch a movie, to go to the cinema, but where do the youth go? When years ago I went to Singapore.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl, for that question. Madam Mayor?
Sure, I think Cheryl got cut off, but we certainly understand the essence of your question, and we want a more vibrant entertainment scene, and we all agree with you. Of course, it will help attract young people, but at the same time, we also acknowledge we have a very high percentage of young families here as well, but of course, they want entertainment too, and we have very vibrant activities in our parks and in our recreation and community centers. But as you described, our aim is to have a very vibrant downtown core. We've dubbed it, in fact, the Exchange District, and we hope to have it animated with shops and cafes and clubs and bars and nightlife as well, as much like we see in downtown Port Credit down by the waterfront. And as we know, the two new developments on the waterfront, Brightwater and Lakeview, are going to have very vibrant scenes as well. And then, of course, I don't want to forget some of the other areas of the city that there's great nightlife, including Streetsville. And every weekend, of course, people gather together in our celebration square to enjoy the many multicultural festivals that are hosted there. So I hear you, of course, and I think we all agree that we want a nightlife that's vibrant, that attracts our young people, because it will keep us a young city, and it will attract talent. More talent will come to the city and want to locate here if we have the kind of entertainment district that you're speaking of. I'm going to ask our Commissioner of Planning and Building, Andrew Whittemore, to talk about what plans he might have as well. Andrew?
Madam Mayor, and what a fantastic question, because ultimately that's really is my job. I'm in the business of creating wonderful community. So in the city of Mississauga, we have a system of various structures called major and community nodes, and each of those are designed, for all intents and purposes, to have a little bit of a focal retail entertainment component to them. But beyond that, as the mayor mentioned, our real focus is the downtown. And if you've been able to drive through the downtown as of late, you will see some of the really amazing projects that are happening. You will see in the future a really fantastic project called the Exchange, as the mayor spoke to, that will have rooftop restaurants, plazas, etc., connected to Square One. You have Lakeview and the cultural district in Lakeview really coming to life. So stay tuned. We are planning for all these things. And as the mayor said, one of the big things that we're doing in the downtown too is trying to balance between residential and employment lands. So council has approved recently a community improvement plan that would incentivize office, which ultimately make all of these restaurants and entertainment facilities a lot more viable when you have the business community in the day and the residents in the evening. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Andrew. For those joining us by phone, please remember that you can press *3 on your keypad at any time to let us know you'd like to ask a question. And for those of you online, please type your question into the question field. We'll go to our next question. It comes from Angie online. Angie says, I've seen a lot in the news recently about City of Mississauga separating from the region of Peel. What is stopping Mississauga from exiting Peel region? Madam Mayor?
That is a great question, Angie, and I'm so glad you heard that. I think the region of Peel was initially established to really fund the growth of Brampton and Caledon, but now Brampton, in fact, is a mature city, and Caledon is in its growing phase as well. So it's very important for me, and I make this no secret, that we expedite what we call the mexit process, Mississauga's exit from region of Peel, and we prioritize our tax dollars into investing in our own city, which has not been the case. You know, we go up to the region of Peel where we have to have our priorities approved by 2 other municipalities. We pay 60% of the funding up at the region of Peel. We have only 50% of the vote. And in addition, we transfer an incremental $85 million a year to Brampton and Caledon to pay for things like roads, planning, and policing. So, you know, I agree with the Premier, we need to build more homes. And what better to expedite the planning process than to have one level of government rather than 2? Think about the duplication we could eliminate and the red tape that we could eliminate, in addition to controlling our own destiny. But unfortunately, this is very much in the purview and in the hands of the Premier. It takes political will, and it is the Premier's decision with that with the provincial government. And so we're waiting for that. We're waiting for that to change. There will be a process established early this year. I'm hearing as soon as later this month, in the end of January, where facilitators will be appointed to go through all our books, to go through our assets, to go through our debts and our revenue streams, and to see how this could be possible for Peel region. As well, they'll be looking at the other regions, Niagara, Halton, York, and what did I miss? One other. Pardon? Durham. So they'll be looking at the other regions as well. But our concern is Peel region, and Mississauga wants mexit, and I know that the Premier is very much aware of that, and there will be a process starting at the end of January, and we're very hopeful that within 12 or 18 months that we could see our dream of mexit realized. Thank you for the question. If the Premier has the will to do so, it is his decision, not ours, unfortunately.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're next going to go to a question from Marie, who is live. She has a question about inflation. Marie, over to you.
Hello?
Hello, Marie. Go ahead.
Hello?
Hello, Marie.
Hello?
Hello, Marie. You're online.
Yeah.
Please go ahead and ask.
Yeah, Mary, yeah.
Oh, Mary, apologies. Go ahead.
Mary. Yeah. You know, with the budget, Mayor, how far do you go to help the citizens with their the inflation? I mean, you go to the food store and the very price of milk and bread, which is the essential commodity for families. What do you do to help these families? I'm a senior and I can see it's very difficult going shopping these days. And I don't have a family, but people have young families, and to feed them, what's in the budget to help to cut this inflation?
You know, these are very serious issues. And unfortunately, the fiscal firepower remains with the federal government and to a lesser extent with the provincial government. But the city, we're subject to the same inflationary rates you are. And that's why we're trying as best we can to hold the line on increased spending to a minimum so that our residents aren't impacted by inflation. What we see is the rising rates of fuel and diesel and also food. The food costs have increased 6 to 7% and greater. I know myself because I run a food drive each year for the food bank. And this year, my goal was to raise $1.7 million for the food bank and also 450,000 pounds of non-perishable food for our food banks because we've seen an increase of 60% of use at our food banks here in Mississauga. So that's very unfortunate. I just want to know, is there anyone else who wants to comment on this? Any of the councillors here or any of the commissioners? Paul? I'm going to have our city manager would like to respond as well. Paul, over to you.
Can't help but empathize with you, and so many of us are indeed suffering with the high cost of living and the high cost of food in particular. But you mentioned that you were a senior, and so we have a number of specific programs for seniors to help, not to offset necessarily, but to help. One of them is a property tax rebate program that in 2022 provided a rebate to eligible seniors of $459. Another is an outdoor subsidy, for outdoor maintenance that again in 2022 provided a subsidy to eligible seniors of $350. Beyond that, we have from my former community services area, Active Assist, that provides for no-cost programming to eligible seniors. And of course, there's the $1 bus fare during non-prime time that helps with seniors moving around the city to their various appointments and so on. So there are a few things. I'm not trying to say that that it fully addresses your concerns, but we're doing what we can to help. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Paul. Reminder, if you have a question for Mayor Crombie or city staff, please press *3 on your phone and you'll be routed to one of our operators. If you're joining us online, please type your question into the question field. Let's get to another question. This question comes online from Mark. Mark asks, how is the city investing in local and regional transit? Madam Mayor?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And let me say that each and every year, our public transit network, our MiWay systems, is one area we continue to invest in. And I'm going to ask our commissioner to tell you how many tens of thousands of hours we invest each and every year to improve our service. But in addition to that, we believe in regionally integrated transit. And we continue to advocate for better transit and funding for better transit from the province and from the federal government. So with specifically, we've asked for all-day two-way service on the Milton GO line. It's the only line that hasn't been announced for all-day and two-way traffic as we have on the Lakeshore line, and certainly the Kitchener line has been announced for the same. We are building light rail transit, LRT, along here, Ontario, 18 kilometers rather, 19 stops, all the way from Port Credit all the way to Brampton Shoppers World along here, Ontario. We've got our Transit Way, which is a bus rapid transit system, 18 kilometers from Erin Mills all the way to the east end of the city, connecting with the crosstown in Toronto. And finally, we've been given approval for bus rapid transit systems on Dundas and on Lakeshore. So you can see we have a master plan to keep Mississauga moving, and we continue to invest in transit. And in fact, all the gas tax money that we do receive from the federal government goes directly back into transit. And for better and more fulsome explanation, why don't we have our Commissioner, Jeff Wright of Transportation, respond. Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and great question on investing in transit. So locally and regionally, we really look to invest on integrating transit with our regional context. So locally, we're looking at fare and service integration work that's ongoing with our neighboring partners. Mississauga does have fare integration with Brampton and Oakville and GO Transit recently, and ongoing work and discussions with TTC, not only on potential fare integration, but service integration as well. So making those connections with GO stations, making sure that MiWay buses arrive and depart around GO train schedules, but also integrating with the TTC as well at some of their key subway stations. In terms of developing a regional transit network, Mayor Crombie identified some of the big projects that we're investing in and we are delivering. It really starts with looking at our longer-term road and infrastructure network plan. From there, we developed more specific corridor studies. So we've done corridor studies on Lakeshore, Dundas, Hurontario, and we're starting this year on Eglinton. Those corridor studies really define the type of transit technology that we want to invest in. And for Hurontario, that was LRT, and for a corridor like Dundas, that's BRT. We then moved from that corridor study into design and ultimately funding aspirations, and we've been very fortunate to get funding, as Madam Mayor pointed out, for Hurontario Street. We've also, over the last little while, received funding from the federal and provincial governments through the ISIP program for Dundas and Lakeshore. And so that's really in terms of how we continue to invest, not only improving local transit, but regional transit. And just backing up to local transit for a sec, Madam Mayor talked about Council's investment in service hours for transit. The pandemic has really impacted how transit has evolved over the last couple of years. So up to and including the 2020 budget year before the pandemic, we are investing in growing transit by approximately 2% a year in service hours. But since the pandemic, we've had to sort of stop our investment in transit while we wait for our ridership recovery. And we've talked about that a few times tonight, and we are pretty much recovered when it comes to ridership. So what that means is that we've reached our 2019 ridership levels in MiWay. And while there are no new service hours planned for 2023, it is something that we're monitoring and adjusting service to meet demand. And we will be likely recommending to Council we continue to make those investments in transit in future years. So with that, I will turn it back to the moderator, Rob, for next steps. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's time for another poll question. But before we do that, I'd like to review the results of the second poll that we did. The question was, how would you prefer the city-funded services? Increase service levels and taxation above the rate of inflation, 8%. Maintain service levels and increase taxes at level of inflation, 46%. And decrease service levels and reduce taxes at 46%. Let's do another question now. The next question is, do you prefer receiving budget information by the city's website, mississauga.ca, press 1 on your keypad, in-person public meetings, press 2, for the city's e-newsletter, press 3, engagement sessions via telephone or online, press 4, and social media, press 5. I'll read that list again. Do you prefer receiving budget information by the city's website, mississauga.ca? Press 1. In-person public meetings? Press 2. For the city's e-newsletter, press 3. Engagement sessions via telephone or online? Press 4. Or social media? Press 5. Our next question comes to us from Tony. Tony submitted his question online and he asks, why does the city maintain so many reserve funds? In times of high inflation, why not release these funds? Madam Mayor?
Yeah, it's actually a great question, and municipal financing is a little different than financing at other levels of government. And we're required to have these reserves, and these reserves are dedicated, and the projects are allocated over a period of time. So such when we plan our capital plan, we plan it over 10 years. So we know which roads will be resurfaced in year 1, year 2, year 3, etc. We know which bridges will be built. We've just finished Torbram Road. We've put the money aside to build the Goreway Bridge, as we've had. We've got money set aside to build our fire stations and renovate them, to renovate our recreation centers. So like you do when you want to repair or replace your roof, you may have to save for a few years before you actually build your new roof. This is the same sort of financing that we have in place here at the city. We prepare over the long term, and we put money in funds each year. And in fact, we have a 2% infrastructure debt levy that we have established, and it may increase to 3% this year if the recommendation goes through. That we put money aside in our reserve so we can plan for rainy days, such as COVID, and when we need that funding, and also to finance our long-term capital projects. Otherwise, we would be debt financing and subject to very high financing fees as well. But I think the best person to respond to that will be our Commissioner of Corporate Services, our CFO, Sherry Lichterman. Sherry, over to you.
You've captured it pretty well. I just comment, we do have a number of reserves, and a couple of the reserves are, our fiscal stability reserves and our revenue stabilization reserves. And those were intended really to provide a cushion in times of challenges. And we certainly experienced that during the pandemic. And unfortunately, we have had to dip into those reserves over the last few years. Despite the money we have received from the province. And so we're going to continue to dip into that reserve as we head into 2023 due to the ongoing impacts of COVID. And so we are using the reserves where we have that discretion. But as the mayor pointed out, there are a number of reserves that we are required by the province or federal government to establish and maintain. And then, of course, there's the reserves that we use to fund our capital projects. So hopefully that helps to answer your question. Back over to Rob.
Thank you very much, Sherry. As a reminder, if you have a question for Mayor Crombie or city staff, please press *3 on your phone and you'll be routed to one of our operators. If you're joining us online, please type your question into the question field. Our next question comes from Maroon. She's going to ask her question live, and she has a question about business investment. Maroon, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Our cities, we have a lot of businesses that's come into our city to develop and to manufacture, right? I'm just wondering, what kind of taxes are they contributing to our economy in Mississauga? Like Amazon, Uber, all the different companies like that.
Yeah, Sherry, that's a great question. And I will share with you that Mississauga is a very desirable place for people to invest. And we have many companies. In fact, we have 75 Fortune 500 companies based here, 1,400 multinationals, and about 96,000 small businesses. And many of those are very small businesses. But nonetheless, we're blessed because we are a city where people are looking, we attract investment, particularly foreign direct investment, which makes me very pleased as a mayor, and is something our former mayor Hazel McCallion began, and I continue each and every day to attract that investment into our city. And when I look at it, about 65% of our revenue comes from business sources and only 35% from our residents. And that's a very healthy ratio. There are many other cities that it's the reverse. They struggle, and they have much higher rates of property taxes than we do as a result. But let me ask our Commissioner of Corporate Services, Sherry Lichterman, to also address this question. Please, Sherry.
Thanks, Mayor Crombie. Yeah, I would just add that, of course, all of these companies that come and locate in the city of Mississauga pay property taxes. And so just as you do with your home, they are also paying taxes, which greatly helps to fund the budget. And also the employees that they bring when they come and locate here. They either come and live in the city, and that, of course, has an economic impact to the city, or they're commuting into the city and they're spending money at our restaurants and at our businesses while they're here. So we certainly benefit a lot, and that is why the city has a great economic development office that is focused on attracting these companies and bringing them into our city. Hopefully that helps answer your question. Back over to Rob.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Our next question comes from Angie online. Angie asks, how is the city enforcing road safety in our neighborhoods? Sorry, how is the city enforcing road safety? In our neighborhood, we have excessive speed and passing on small local roads. Mayor Crombie?
Yes, it's a complicated issue. And of course, we work very closely with not only our bylaw enforcement, but Peel Regional Police. And I think what we saw during the pandemic was a lot of road rage and people not respecting traffic safety. But we've come a long way since then, and the police certainly have a plan called Erase, which helps eliminate those very loud mufflers and that drag racing speeding on some of our streets. We've used some community safety zones, as you know, that we've reduced the speed limit on many of our side streets to make them much safer. We've also invested in something called advanced traffic management systems to help synchronize many of our lights. And in fact, we have also automated speed enforcement cameras, which is the big one. And in 2021, our council approved the use of these automated speed enforcement cameras to install 22 of them, and they're rotated in some of the more sensitive areas across the city, like community safety areas, school zones, etc. And it's going to be a very strong source of revenue for us, I believe, in the future. They're through 58 school zones, and they're operating speeds by reducing an average of 10 kilometers an hour. They have helped reduce speeds by 10 kilometers an hour since they have been in operation, and compliance has increased almost 30% as a result. There have been over 23,000 charges between January and October in the year of 2022, and it's expected to be even greater in 2023. So that has been pretty significant for us, as well as we've implemented something called Vision Zero to make our streets safer and our roads safer as well. And we continue to our best efforts to accommodate accessibility needs by audible pedestrian signals, bicycle traffic signals, etc. And we're keeping an eye on the future by creating programs to have in place and resources to manage these initiatives through the Vision Zero plan. If anyone else wants to comment on Vision Zero, any of these programs, maybe our Commissioner of Transportation and Works, Jeff?
I think you've summarized what our intention is, really taken back to that Vision Zero approach that Council adopted in terms of our overall approach to how we operate, maintain, and even construct our road network. In terms of the specific question around enforcement, residents are able to go on to the Region Appeal Police website under Road Watch, and you could submit some information that talks about a complaint that you have, or you want to report an issue. Peel Regional Police will receive that information, and they will work to provide additional enforcement in that area based on the complaints that come in. But Madam Mayor, from the city's perspective, we really nailed it around the automated speed enforcement. That is really one of the biggest tools we have to really enforce speed limits on streets. And I think we've seen a lot of success with that program in terms of reducing speeds, which is the overall objective in terms of what we want to see. And then in building on top of that, it's really the investments that we want to make in changing our roads and changing our network, investments in traffic calming, investments in complete streets. When we look at resurfacing now, we're not just looking at replacing the asphalt. We're looking most times around doing integrated road projects that look at pedestrian, cycling, all forms of mobility to really try and reduce and make our streets safer. So great question. And with that, I'll turn it back to the moderator, Rob.
Thank you very much, Jeff. As a reminder, if you have a question for Mayor Crombie or city staff, please press *3 on your phone and you'll be routed to one of our operators. If you're joining us online, please type your question into the question field. Our next question comes from Sabina, who asks online, what are plans of our city council to handle the increasing crime, which is happening every day within Mississauga? Mayor Crombie?
Sabina, thank you for that question. And let me assure you and all of the residents online tonight that Mississauga continues to be one of the safest cities in Canada, statistically speaking. And we have for 20 years now. We're one of the safest cities in Canada. And we have a fantastic police force led by a very dynamic young chief named Nish Duryappa, who has a lot of plans to modernize policing through innovation, through technology. He has brought in body-worn cameras, etc. But each year, of course, they come forward and they ask for further enhancement of a number of officers, boots on the ground, as we call them. And their proposal is 70 new officers this year. And of course, when they respond, they triage their responses. So like you would in a hospital, what is the crime, the active crime scene at the time? So if it's a violent crime, the police will always go there sooner and faster than, for instance, any incident on a roadway. So we do have a fulsome plan. I happen to be on the police board. I work very closely with the chief and our deputies to ensure that we continue to be one of the safest cities in Canada and that we prioritize community well-being and safety all the time. Thank you, Sabina, for the question.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Our next question comes to us live from Leslie, who has a question about transit ridership in the city. Leslie, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good evening. My question is, I understand that the transit ridership is actually lower or around only the 50% mark for capacity, and I feel we spend a lot of money and emphasis on transit without the ridership to match it, and I'm wondering if the number that I quoted is roughly correct, or if not, if it can be corrected, and an explanation made as to why we focus on this ridership when the roads and drivers are perhaps more of the priority. Thank you.
It's a great question, and of course, roads were always the priority, but we need to give people options. We need to get people out of their cars as well. And by that, we are investing in public transit, LRT, all-day two-way go, the BRT lines, et cetera. It's better for the environment, as you know, and we can carry more people. Certainly buses carry 60 people, but you know, our LRT will be carrying 200, upwards of 200 people. So ridership declined during COVID. That's very true, but it is climbing back up. I think we're almost at 60 to 65% now, but I think to speak to it in a more fulsome way, I'll ask our Commissioner of Transportation and Works, Jeff Wright, to talk about our ridership and why we invest in public transit.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. So great question on transit. And yeah, Madam Mayor, you're correct. The pandemic had a major impact on transit ridership from 2020, 2021, 2022, and here we are in 2023. And so transit ridership did take a pretty significant drop. And I am pleased to report, though, towards the end of 2022, we finished off last year at what I would call pretty much recovered from the pandemic. So our ridership has reached pretty much 100% of the 2019 levels. So we've gone full circle and recovered from the pandemic. So what that means is we haven't really invested in growing transit over the last couple of years because we've been managing the cost impact on reduced ridership. That's had an impact on our revenue budget, but also the demand for service. But as ridership increases back to 100% of where we were in 2019, we are seeing different ridership patterns emerge. So traditionally, we saw a strong AM peak, a little bit of a break during midday, and very strong PM peak. With people's work arrangements now, that peakiness, I would call it, has certainly flattened a bit and has created more of a demand for transit all day. And as ridership increases, we do match demand where ridership warrants. So where we have high transit ridership on a school route or an industrial area or a high employment area, certainly we'll match bus capacity to that corridor to deal with things like overcrowding, as an example. And where we have other corridors where there's less ridership, we'll use smaller buses, 40-foot buses, and we'll have appropriate frequencies or levels of service for that corridor. So we do take a very scientific approach in terms of how we're managing and monitoring transit ridership in real time and make those adjustments to match demand with ridership. So I hope that answers the question, and back to you, Rob, as the moderator.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Our next question comes to us from Phil, who writes online, why are we using the capital budget on LRT during construction? Mayor Crombie?
Well, I've got some great news. We actually aren't using our capital budget on the LRT because this 18-kilometer, 19-stop LRT that was approved in, I think, early in 2015 is being led by Metrolinx. It's being funded by the provincial government. In fact, it's a $5 billion contract that's a local consortium called Mobilinx is building for us. They're designing, building, financing, operating, and maintaining our LRT. Of course, we will be putting in added money to enhance some of the stations, but this is, of course, a provincial project. We're 100% funded by the provincial government. And of course, building public transit in a city as mature as ours has many benefits, not only a greening effect. Of course, it's good for the environment. It also reduces the congestion and gives people options to get out of their car as well. So again, don't know if maybe our Commissioner of Transportation Works wants to make a comment on the LRT as well, and our capital budget. Or?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And so it's a good question, and you've answered, 100% funded by the province for LRT construction on here, Ontario. We are funding city infrastructure because of the project. So a good example, we had to replace storm sewers within that corridor. Because the project is under construction now, it gives us an opportunity to replace some of that aging infrastructure now. So we do have some capital dollars assigned to some initiatives as part of the LRT project that Metrolinx is funding. Another example would be traffic signals along the corridor. Metrolinx is paying to replace and build new traffic signals, but we're investing a little bit now to provide some battery backup at those traffic signals should there be a power outage, as an example. So there is some capital funding that is assigned to the corridor, but it's not specifically assigned to building the LRT project. And if we just want to switch quickly to the operating component of that, so once the LRT service becomes operational at the end of 2024, the city will be paying for the operating costs of the LRT. Mind you, we will be getting all the fair revenue that comes with that, but we will be making a commitment and an investment in the operations of the LRT project. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Moving on, we have a question online from Manila. Manila asks, are we going to have more electric car charging stations in Mississauga? Mayor Crombie?
Oh, that's a great question. And yes, we are. And I'm going to ask Jeff to speak to it further in just 1 second. But we've installed more than 50 electric vehicle charging stations for our own fleet. And we're continuing to prioritize carbon technologies for future fleet procurements. We've installed 22 electric vehicle chargers for public use as well. Our additional fleet and public electric vehicle chargers are planned. Many are planned for future years. So we've installed 59 electric vehicle EV charging stations for the city's fleet and 22 for the public, and added 38 kilometers of, I'll let that one go. But why don't I ask our Commissioner, Jody Robolos, who is our Commissioner of Community Services, to further speak about this issue. But it's very exciting changes that are happening in Mississauga with respect to EV charging stations.
And thank you for the question. We have really made some commitments during our 10-year climate change action plan, and electrification of fleet is a big component for us. Both city fleet, transit fleet being our biggest fleet from the city, but also for residents, and making sure that our green development standards, as we're building new buildings, as more homes are coming online, we ensure that these buildings are prepared for future needs, and electrification is key. So we have our first fully electric grass cutting crew, which you'll see out and about across the city as well. So zero emissions, residents love it. Imagine those leaf blowers that are going at 8 o'clock in the morning in your neighborhood. So both from a city perspective, but encourage everybody from a public perspective to also look at electrification. As we upgrade our public infrastructure, community centers, libraries, we're also including charging stations there. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you, Jody. Our next question comes to us from Ted. Ted asked us to read his question, which is regarding snow clearing in the winter. Ted asks, what is the city doing to prepare for significant snowfall this winter? Mayor Crombie?
Ted, it's a great question. I had a chance to tour our yards, and our teams are ready. They're going to be out there prepping the roads, and we haven't had significant snowfall yet, luckily, but you never know. I think it's still coming. And just to let you know that we have 5,700 lanes or kilometers of roadways and on-street bike lanes to clear, 3,300 bus stops, 105 kilometers of roadside multi-use trails, and about 500 pieces of equipment, which includes salters and plows and loaders, tractors, and small trucks, and over 1,000 pedestrian crossings. And we use 60,000 tons of salt. Huge. And now we have different rules for when our equipment goes out there, and I'm going to ask our Commissioner Jeff Wright to speak to that in 1 second. But residential roads are cleared after the snow falls. We prep them first, and then with salt, and then they're cleared after the significant snowfall. Otherwise, it doesn't help. So, Jeff, why don't you speak to this on how we monitor, how we track, how we get our salting trucks and plows out on the street, and also be sure to tell everyone, well, in fact, I'll tell them now, when you need updates on snow removal, follow the @ symbol on Twitter, @Mississauga Snow on Twitter, or follow the progress of our snow plows. You can track them too at mississauga.ca/snow. So everything is online and virtual, and you'll know when those snow plows are coming to your streets. Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. So as you've mentioned, we are ready and have been ready for winter maintenance since October of 2022. That's really when the season kicks off. As we get ready to fight snow, as they call it. So we actively monitor weather on a 24/7 basis. Whether it's a week out or 2 weeks out, and we kind of monitor where storms are coming in. There might be a storm coming in later this week, so be prepared for that. Just an FYI. But once we finish our monitoring, then we move into operations mode. So once we're sure that there's going to be a weather event, we do have staff that are out patrolling the roads on a frequent basis, and when they spot and when we see precipitation starting to fall, we'll activate our snow plan. And that involves calling out our staff, Mississauga staff, as well as our contractors who help support us in our winter maintenance program. And so once we get out there, our service levels take over. So you've outlined, Madam Mayor, in terms of when we start brining roads in advance of events, when we start salting in terms of the level of accumulation that's there, and then when we move into a full plowing operations, and then ultimately a snow removal program. So with that, we do have over 5,700 lane kilometers of roads that we maintain. 1,700 lane kilometers of sidewalks, around 3,500 bus stops, as an example, that receive priority treatment. And to do all that, we have approximately 500 pieces of equipment, and that's a mix of salters, plows, loaders, tractors, small trucks, etc. So we're well equipped and well funded for winter maintenance and whatever Mother Nature wants to bring our way. So back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Jeff. Just as a reminder, if you're on the phone, you can press *3 on your keypad at any time to let us know you'd like to ask a question. And for those of you who are online, you can type your question into the question field. Our next question comes from Lorna. Lorna has a question that she would like to ask live with respect to support for seniors and benches on the Queensway. Lorna, the floor is yours.
Everyone. I am just calling to find out about adding more benches on the Queensway path. On the Queensway, like from Mavis to Confederation, there are very limited rest benches, and I walk the path quite frequently, and I would like to see more benches added. Is that a possibility?
Hi, Lorna, it's Mayor Crombie. And so, of course, we have some bench programs at the city, and also you can speak to some of the BIAs about some of those benches, those that are memorials that you see in the Streetsville or Port Credit. But I'm going to ask our commissioner to speak to this specifically along the Queensway, as I've heard from many seniors, they want more seating so that when they're out on their walks, they can be comfortable and sit in shade. So, Jeff Wright, our Commissioner of Transportation Works, what's your plan to provide more benches for our seniors, please?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and certainly in partnership with Jody and Community Services, we work together on really assessing the need for benches. So Jody has a long history and good approach in terms of managing that need in terms of our parks and our trails, our trail network. But when it comes to the roads and the roads right away, that's another area where I take over and we look at where that need is. A lot of that need on the road network is around the transit network and where people are accessing transit and perhaps they're waiting for their bus, and certainly benches help in that perspective. But back to the residents' question, yeah, we'll take that under advisement and we'll look to ways that we can accommodate that request. And Lorna, if you wanted to perhaps provide a follow-up, more specifically where along the trail, you could email that to budget@mississauga.ca or contact 311, and we can get that more specific information and look to help you out with additional benches.
Does Jody want to respond as well, Jody?
And I think, Lorna, you had a couple of questions. One was related to transit shelters, and I think that's Jeff's team. But certainly we can definitely look along the Queensway Trail and see what we can do. to add more benches. We normally have a program where it's within a certain distance. We make sure that we have some kind of rest stop. Some of those may look like large boulders that we put that are, someone can rest on there, but we'll certainly take that. We'll take a crew out and take a walk along there and see what we can do to add in some more benches.
Thank you, Jody, for that answer. We're coming close to the end of our meeting this evening. However, we have time for a couple of more questions. I'm going to go next to Karen, who called in but asked us to read her question. She asks, what is the city doing to keep the community safe from coyotes and foxes? Mayor Crombie?
Oh, this is a big issue. I hear about this often from our residents as well, and certainly our animal services coyote management strategy puts our public safety first. And it focuses on education, awareness, coexistence, and addressing wildlife feeding, which tends to be a bit of a problem. People want to feed the coyotes. And that's central to most of the coyote encounters. They return to those locations because they have been fed by humans. Animal Services is proactive in community outreach and consistently deliver information sessions. They have mail outs, door-to-door resident engagements. They do presentations, both virtual and in person. They use temporary signage to make you aware of them. Educational messages spread around signboards across the city to make you aware. And there's also interactive online coyote and fox mapping. And I know that many of our councillors have had their own town hall meetings specifically addressing the coyote issue right across the city. So I would also encourage you to speak to your councillor, and I bet they will have a session coming up in the future. But I'll also pass this over to our Commissioner, Jeff Wright, to speak more about animal services and what's done for coyotes. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. And I think you've nailed it with the big one there is around feeding of wildlife in Mississauga. And that really is something that we really discourage people from doing because it really does attract wild animals like foxes, like coyotes into the neighborhood because they become reliant on that as a food source. And so if you want to take a look at the website, there's a lot of information on there about what to do if you have a pet, how to protect your pet from a coyote. If you encounter a coyote, say you're on a walk on your street or if you're in a trail, what are the best practices to do if you encounter a coyote? And then following that, there is an interactive coyote map where you can take a look at where there has been reported coyote sightings, but also add your check mark to that as well. And once we receive that information, we'll analyze that and to see if there's an increasing trend around coyote sightings and if there's increasing activity. Our animal services officers will go out, they'll meet with residents, they'll do some education around how to live with coyotes, how to manage their interactions. But things do escalate, and we've seen that in other municipalities. So we have a human coyote response table where there's a degree of escalation involved. Everything from when you encounter a coyote, unfortunately, if there's a coyote attacks a pet, and then a significant, more aggressive coyote that perhaps would attack a person. So we have a protocol in place that deals with that level of escalation. And that's all detailed on our website as well. So I would encourage the caller to get online and look at that information. And certainly if there's any additional questions, as Madam Mayor, you suggested, they could reach out to their counselor or call 311, who also has a good database of information that can be responded to. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Jeff. We have time for just one more question. Our final question of the night comes from Phil. Phil writes online, Mississauga is the only city to experience negative growth in the last census. What is the plan to reverse this? Mayor Crombie?
I was very discouraged when I saw that number, Phil. And we lost residents during COVID, as some other cities did. Some of the urban metropolitan areas saw a decrease in their population, and those people moved out to more remote areas as people worked remotely and had the ability to do that. Also, we all became masters of WebEx and Teams and whatever other programs that we had that we could allowed us to work remotely. But certainly, we are in the growth phase of this city, and we're adding 250,000 new residents over the next 30 years. In fact, by 2050, we'll be 1 million people here in Mississauga. So I think that was a small glitch in the census, and I don't expect to see that again. We have building occurring right across our city. There, the Lakeview development, we're adding 8,000 units there. That could be 30,000 people. In the Brightwater development, another 5,000 units. That could be another 20,000 people. In the downtown, we're building over 55 towers rather. 55 towers are coming into our downtown. That could add 70,000 people right into the downtown. So I think it's a matter of making housing available. And I think that during COVID, we saw an exodus from urban areas as people were able to work remotely and move to areas that were perhaps more affordable to them in more suburban or rural issues. So thank you very much for that question. I'll pass it. Does anybody else want to comment, or I think we're done? Andrew, what you wanted to comment about our plan to address our negative growth, and then we'll pass it back to the moderator for closing.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll be quick. I think you did a good job in responding to that. The other issue during the pandemic was around immigration policy and foreign students, which was not happening at the time. So that did make a difference. But what I wanted to really emphasize was that is the cumulative number, but the reality is Mississauga grew in many places. And the reason that our number looked low is because some of the census neighborhoods have declined in population as those neighborhoods age. So that's something that we've been looking at through gentle intensification of neighborhoods to allow for those smaller second units that you referred to, other kind of infill projects to really allow some gentle growth to go back into those neighborhoods that were once thriving and heavily populated with families. And with that, I'll turn it back to Rob.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We're coming to the end of our time together this evening. There have been so many great questions and good conversation. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. For those interested, there are many ways to learn more and get involved in our 2023 budget. Make sure to tune in to the upcoming Budget Committee meetings in person or online starting on Monday, January 16th. If you have any additional questions or comments, please email them to budget@mississauga.ca or call 311. Also, don't forget to visit mississauga.ca/budget for more budget information. Mayor Crombie, do you have any closing thoughts to share with our audience tonight regarding the budget consultation?
Well, yes, I do, Rob. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful questions. I was very impressed at the caliber of questions tonight and the discussions that we had. And while we continue to face challenges, I'm confident in our ability to overcome them together. We're all very proud of this great city, and we're proud to call it home. And I know that my fellow council members and the leadership team here at the city, as well as our staff at the city, we remain committed to being strong, focused, and determined to meet our challenges ahead and make 2023 a resounding success. Let me also thank our councillors for sticking it out tonight. We had a huge team out with us tonight. Councillor Stephen Dasco from Ward 1, give a wave. Councillor Alvin Tejo from Ward 2, wave. Councillor John Kovac from Ward 4. Councillor Joe Hornick from Ward 6. Councillor Matt Mahoney from Ward 8. Councillor Martin Reed from Ward 9, and Brad Butt, Councillor from Ward 11. So there are many ways you can stay informed on the budget process that Rob has already outlined, and you can also find a wealth of information at our website, mississauga.ca/budget. If you have any questions or comments about the budget, you're welcome to email us and use the email budget@mississauga.ca. We also encourage you to keep up to date on our budget discussions by following the city on Facebook and on Twitter. And finally, you can watch the upcoming Budget Committee meetings, which are going to be live streamed on our website at mississauga.ca and will be archived for your future viewing as well. So thank you once again for taking the time to join our budget engagement session, and have a lovely evening. Good night.